Hi, I'm Ron Nutter, and in this time, I'm going to show you what's involved in setting up your own media server, and that starts now. Okay, I've alluded to in the past several videos about setting up a media server, and it really is been made to sound more difficult than it really is, especially if you're not used to working with that kind of technology. Because I had read for several weeks, and I was starting to get a little concerned that it was going to be a whole lot of pieces, parts, and Ouija boards and getting everything to work. So I kind of wondered if I hadn't bitten off more than I could chew. But I hit the right combination of things, and then the pieces started falling into place. So that's why I want to help you avoid some of what I had to go through and get you feeling a little more comfortable. Because let's face it, when you think about a smart home, I mean, it's not a smart home, but a media server, you start seeing all these pieces, parts, and going, oh, great, now what am I going to do? Well, let's boil it down to a couple of steps. The first thing is we're going to have to look at putting together a media server. Now, that basically is a fancy term for some sort of computer that is going to be, at least in part, a repository for your videos, for your movies. And the movies can be either from your personal collection, it can be stuff that you've recorded off the TV. You're going to need to have some sort of client, because if you've ever heard the term before, and some of the trade press is very big on buzzwords, they'll say client server. Well, what are we really talking about? Okay, at this point, you've got the two components you will interact the most with. The media server, okay, the name says it right there, that is the server. But you don't, to get things to play, you don't really interact with that. You have a client. That can be any number of things. And in our case, and we'll go into this a little bit, it's going to be a streaming media receiver, much like you probably got, what's a Roku, Apple TV, whatever. We'll go into that. Now, you're going to have some place to store all this. An hour's worth of a movie it could be as little as about 1.5 gigs to 2 gigs. And when you get up to, say, like a 2.5 hour movie, you could be talking upwards of 5 gigs for a single file. And there's formats that you've got to use, but don't worry about that. I'm trying to lay you out a roadmap for what we're going to be doing here for the next probably a month or so, because I've been working with this, and I've actually got one running in production, but I've got a backup system that I'm going to walk you through setting all this up, and we'll just take it one step at a time. Now, like I said, you got to have storage. Now, in some cases, the computer that you do this with, and I'm going to use the term loosely, and you'll see why in a little bit, is going to need to have some degree of storage on its own to be able to do much of anything. And so some of the storage may be in the server, and you may have some external storage, and you may have heard terms like NAS or SAN, and to a degree, I use those two terms interchangeably, because to a degree, they're very close. There are some differences. So before some of you all start sending me email, leaving comments, I'm trying to keep this as unconfusing as possible. Now, the other piece of the pie, and this is one that I've been looking at and actually had done very briefly when my fiber provider decided to have me down for about 3 or 4 days while saying the problem was at my house. Ended up wasn't, but that's another video. I started getting things off the air, hence OTA. There is a component that you can have as a part of a media server. You don't have to have it, but with having all this other infrastructure, the media server, storage, and client, this is almost, I won't say it's free, but your large amount of your money is going to be spent with these 3 items right here. Getting this to run is going to be very straightforward. So let's start moving on. Now, there are a multitude of options that you can use for a media server. Microsoft has kind of bowed out of the game. They used to have it available up until about Windows 8.1. Then Windows 10, they pretended like it doesn't exist. Well, there are all sorts of options out there. There was something initially was known as XMBC or XBMC, and then and it's changed names now to Kodi, I think. There's a variety of options out there. And when I was looking for something that would be, if I ran into a problem, that I would be able to get support for it without necessarily having to depend on the forums. And there's nothing wrong with forums, but sometimes you want to talk to the people who are writing it. And with Plex, you get just that. Now, that's the software component. You're going to have some sort of platform for this to run on. And you've got a lot of options here. You've got Mac Mini. Now, that's what I'm using. I happen to have a couple of Mac Minis around, so it made a lot of sense, especially when mine had 1 terabyte of storage. So that made the process start a little bit faster. You can do something like the Intel NUC. Now, if you've got a larger system, that's great, but I'm trying to keep things small, compact, and hopefully with little to no fan. So, but we don't always get what we want, so that's why I went with that option. And now, when you go with the Intel NUC, which NUC stands for Next Unit of Computing, I believe, you've got your choice. You can put Windows on it, or you can go with a flavor of Linux. And I'm going to stick primarily with showing the Mac and Windows, because Linux gets a little bit under the hood, and unless you've worked with Linux a lot, then I don't want to add more difficulty than really is needed. So we'll probably at this point stick with those 2 options. Now, for those of you who know this next item, you're saying, well, what's the NVIDIA Shield doing out here? The NVIDIA Shield, which is running essentially Android TV OS, has the ability to function as a media server. Now, the disadvantage here is it has practically no storage, so you're going to be getting external storage right out of the gate. So I may eventually touch on that one, but these 2 are going to be the ones I'll be dealing with, because what this has forced me to do is I've got, 12 years worth of digital pictures that I had never really looked at. I'd shot them, but there wasn't an easy way to look at them, that at least when I could do it when the spur of the moment hit me and I wanted to do it. So what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to move forward with the Mac Mini. And depending on your experience, I have seen, and there's a link in the show notes to this, I found a Mac Mini refurbished with a 500 gig hard drive for what was about $400 or $500, which is very reasonable. So the beauty of it, the fan in it's very small. I've yet to be able to drive mine hard enough that that the fan really has to run to the point where I can hear it. So that's, step 1. Now, the next thing we've got to look at is we have to have some sort of client. Now, the client is going to be the piece that connects to the TV. Now, at this point, and what I haven't really touched on, is whether this is a Mac Mini or an Intel NUC, this is running as what's called headless. There is no monitor attached. There doesn't have to be a keyboard or mouse. So basically, you turn it on, it boots up, and you're ready to start serving out media or recording things from other devices. And we've got a fair amount to go over yet. So there you see there's 3 options. I've got the Roku, I've got the Amazon Fire, and the Amazon Fire I'm using isn't the newer one. It's one I call the Gen 1. So even older devices can do this. And you can also use Apple TV, because they're the clients. They get the stream from the media server, they bring it in, and then they hook to your TV through usually an HDMI cable. So that really is, that's the minimal things that you can have and have a media server. Now, I went with the Roku. I've got the other 2 devices out there, and I am working with them to a degree, but the Roku seemed to have the best functionality, at least at this point in time. Everything is subject to change. Now, we're going to get into storage, and this is where you may not need to add this right away. Be more concerned about getting the media server up and running at a very base level. You may get a few of your digital pictures on there. You may get some movies on there. And we're getting ready to cover the over-the-air stuff. So you can get a feel for several weeks kind of how you're going to use it. So don't worry about that. You could start out very simply with adding a 1 or 2 terabyte USB drive and plugging it into the back of the media server. So why put it somewhere else when you don't have to? When you start getting past a couple of terabytes, I would say this is when you need to start looking at a NAS or a storage area network. and NAS probably is more what you would go as network attached storage. Yeah, you've got the 2-bay system from, it's a DS Play 218, I believe it is, and this is something that's one of the options, and it is one of the better options out there from an entry-level standpoint. Now you can get 7-bay, 14-bay, it depends on how big your collection is, and that's something that in time you can figure out, but it's easier to crawl before you try to walk. So at this point, I'll probably be going initially with the 2-bay NAS. And I've got links to all this in the description. You're going to have the links there that if you decide you want to start buying some of this, then if you use that, it helps me out a little bit. I'll get a little bit of commission on it. Doesn't change what you pay at all. Now, the last component to all this is the over-the-air. Now, this is the part that gets interesting because there are several USB tuners that you can get, and they're digital tuners, so they get the HD television that's out there. But the ones that I saw have to plug into the back of the media server. So that says it's going to start using resources here. So I went with something from SiliconDust, and it's a 2-tuner, which means there's 2 separate tuners in it. So you can either record 2 programs or be recording one and streaming from one of the local television sources. Now, if you get beyond that, you may have to think a little bit about how much you're going to want to do. They have a 4-tuner option with this. With Plex, I can't speak to the others, but with Plex, you can have multiple tuners. So it's just a matter of how you go in and schedule things. And then you're going to have some sort of HD antenna, and this is the one I've got was like $20 on Amazon. I don't get all my stations, and I'm looking at improving that. There's 1 or 2 stations that are within the 50-mile range, but I've got the antenna inside my house, and I've got several drywall layers between it and where the towers are. So I get most of them, not all of them. And naturally, the one I'd really like to get is the one that I can't get a good signal like on, because with digital TV, it's not like, well, one time when I lived in Arkansas, I was in Texarkana, and I could watch a station out of Little Rock at night. Now, it had to be specific conditions, and it was still a little bit grainy or noisy. Well, with digital TV, you either see it or you don't. So it's either got to have a good enough signal to lock, or you're not going to get anything. So here's what you're looking at really with a media server. It can play from either external storage or, right now I'm running off the 1 terabyte drive. It hooks to your TV through whatever media receiver that you've got. And then the added bonus is, now, see, with this particular device from SiliconDust, it hooks to the network. So it talks to the media server over an Ethernet connection, so you don't have USB to here. And I tried to have as much processing things that weren't depending on resources here. So there's 3 connections on the back of this. There is the power, the Ethernet connection, and the antenna. That's it. You configure this through a web browser, and you can kind of see where this is going. There's several videos that I'm going to be doing with this. So it's very straightforward, and it really is not hard. I started off with the NVIDIA Shield. There were some things I didn't understand what it was doing, so I fought some things probably I didn't have to, and that's where I put one of my Mac Minis into the picture, and it took me about 2 hours to get it ready. And when I say 2 hours, that's not installing Plex. Plex was barely a 3-minute process. It was getting the latest Mac OS operating system installed, getting the latest patches installed, getting it ready to do what it needed to do. Plex took care of everything else. Now, what I'm going to show you here is we're going to require the Plex Pass. And what that does is that unlocks being able to store what you're seeing here and basically it gets you to store what you're getting over the air, and it has some other functionality. But especially when you get into the OTA stuff, the Plex Pass will get you a subscription so that you can get a program guide, and so far it's been pretty accurate. One time it was a lot of whack, but let's face it, stations can change stuff at the last minute. So I wanted you to get kind of a picture of where we were going to hit. It really is very straightforward. We're going to take it one step at a time. Next video is going to be showing you how to get it up and running on a Mac. Everything follows I'll still be doing with the Mac Mini, but then I'll also show you what it's like to get Plex up and running on the Windows box. I've got a Intel NUC with running Windows 10. We can do it on there with not a problem, and it give you an idea. So it's a matter of personal preference, because really, once you get these things up and running, you don't really touch that media server. You'll do it through a web browser, which is either scheduling the recording off of the OTA connection, the live air broadcast, or making some minor changes. You really won't touch the media server. And one of the criticisms that I've seen about Plex, and really this is, it may have been from comments earlier on, but it really has not been the case from what I have seen, is people would put new media out there. They would put some movie they had, and it's not, you're limited not just what you've got in terms of what your camcorder has done, but if you've got a DVD collection or Blu-rays, I'll show you how to do that. Now that's a task I would say let's wait until you've got some of the lower hanging fruit up and running, because the ripping DVDs, and I'm not encouraging piracy at all. If you have a copy of it, then that's what you work with, but you don't sell that, you don't give it away, because then you don't have a license to be able to use that. But that will be one of the latter subjects we deal with, because everything else is let's get things up and running and get you used to working with it, and then at that point, run wild with your imagination. Well, I've rambled on long enough, but I wanted to kind of take a few minutes to give you kind of a chalkboard talk or roadmap, whatever you call it, of this next piece, because I think this is going to help you put the pieces of the puzzle together, and instead of seeing all those pictures, and now you'll know where each part fits in the puzzle. And I've had Plex up and running for just a couple of weeks now, and I love it. I think you'll be very happy with it. So there's links to everything in the show notes. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. Once I hit, my goal right now is 1,000 subscribers. Once I hit that, then that gives me some credentials to go to manufacturers and hopefully get them to work with me. And Plex, several people have been very great to work with, so I have no complaints there. But there's some other people I haven't been able to get the door open with, that once I can get over 1,000, that's going to help with that. Please also, if you want to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to the channel, that way you'll get notified every time I put a new video up. And I'm trying to do it 2 to 3 times a week. This video, for example, took me probably over 2 hours getting the slides where I wanted them and to where it kind of made sense. And I'm not a graphic person, but hopefully I think I got the point across is what we're looking at. So thank you for your time. Please share this with anybody you know who might be interested in it, because it really is very straightforward. And once you get things up and running, you'll have a lot of fun using it, because I know that I have. And do want to say one more thank you to Plex, because they've been very helpful in getting started with this, and are giving me the tools where I can show you about the over-the-air recording and all that. And guys, it's fun. That's all I can say. Again, thank you for your time, and we'll see you in the next video.